Hello everyone, my name is Stephen and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some malicious compliance stories. And quickly before this video starts, I just want to say about 60% of you lovely people aren't currently subscribed, so if you enjoy these videos, please make sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an upcoming video. With that being said, let's get into the stories. Can't work remotely? Guess it's vacation or sick leave then. As you can imagine, a lot of companies are figuring out how to manage remote staff right now in response to COVID-19. I'm a social media manager for a large university and am considered essential staff for some instances. If there's a snow day, I can work from home but need to monitor social channels for questions, problems, etc. Weeks before the virus got as widespread as it is now in the US, I asked my supervisor to consider remote options, as my husband and I had been keeping a close look at its progression abroad, and he has an autoimmune disease. But I was literally laughed at and was told it would never happen. Last week, our university announced that they'd be shifting to online learning for 3 weeks. I again asked if we'd be given remote options at this time as well to help flatten the curve, and given that my job can be done literally anywhere, it shouldn't be a problem. I again was told, nope, as essential staff, I'd absolutely have to come in, and more details would be given in an HR email later that day. HR email comes in and affirms that all staff were expected to come in as normal, about 4,000 employees, and if you wanted to take time at home, you'd need to take personal, vacation, or sick time. Staff could call or email HR and make individual cases to request remote work, but I'm in the state with the 4th highest cases of COVID-19 right now. And we all know college campuses are cesspools for disease, so staff is livid. The next day, I emailed my supervisor again and told him that I called/emailed HR saying that if I don't get approval for remote work, I'm going to follow email protocol and take sick leave for the foreseeable future. Luckily, I am in a union and can request up to 26 weeks of 100% paid sick leave for myself or caring for family, and I knew it would get approved. I said the ball was in their court and they could either have me at home actually working or have me at home and be down an essential staff member. Silence. In the meantime, I got a phone call back from HR from a frantic employee who said they received literally thousands of emails and phone calls similar to the one I sent, and I could expect an update by the end of the day. Turned out I was not the only one threatening their bosses with time off. At 5 p.m., we got an email that all staff and classes are remote until further notice. I know it's likely they would have eventually made this call anyway, but I'd like to think the thousands of employees threatening malicious compliance made it happen sooner. Yeah, any kind of that mindset in this current pandemic is ridiculous. I think despite anybody being too stubborn, I think they're very quickly going to change once this starts bubbling up even more, as it's pretty apparent it's starting to head that way, unfortunately. And why does a social media manager have to come in anyways? Just wondering. Teacher told me to remove my Bandaids because they're unsightly, so I showed her unsightly. Preface: I am not self-harming myself, I am just a very clumsy person with a high pain tolerance who works with sharp objects. I also wear these bandages to keep me from scratching at them because I have no self-control. The story: I injure myself a lot, falling downstairs, bumping into a wall, getting a face full of the door, the works. I also have a high pain tolerance, so most of my scrapes are just superficial and just look kinda gross. So I cover them with something: Band-Aids, medical tape, a tissue, and tape. This is where our cumulative issues begin. My nervous habit is to pick at my nails to the point that they will bleed. To counteract this, I put pieces of medical tape around my nails and fingers, so I almost constantly have tape around my fingers. I do Science Olympiad. My event requires me to cut pieces of wood with a saw or box cutter, and not being the master of fine motor skills, I do eventually slip up, so slap another band-aid on that. Finally, I do theater. The scenes we do are kinda rough. I'm in multiple fight scenes, and we do it on a crappy office carpet, so many carpet burns on elbows and knees. Okay, if you're still with me, you're a saint. P.S. Any insults is conveniently changed to a root vegetable. A few months ago, we switched schedules and I had to go to my Bible class. Now, this teacher is in no way the best, but she's tolerable. So we have little old me walking into class with at least 5 to 10 Band-Aids on her person, still on nerve from a presentation before and getting stares from the teacher. My classmates were chill with all the Band-Aids. At this point is no additional issues. While we're doing the worksheet, she comes over and says, "May we talk after class?" And my obedient little self says sure. We get to after class and she tells me that my Band-Aids are disturbing. I told her that I could change to skin tone ones. These were bright colors. She says no, this dense carrot tells me they're unsightly and I shouldn't hurt myself. I sigh and agree to stop wearing the Band-Aids just to please this stale turnip. The next day rolls around, showing up to school with some scabby fingers, strawberry knees, and some scratches on my arm. Personally, I'm fine with blood and ick, but even this was kinda unsightly. Walking into class extra early just to see the horrified look on the sour beet's face is lovely. My knees started to bleed a little from the constant movement. She pulls me aside again after class and said I could continue using my Band-Aids. I think the teacher had somewhat good intentions, but having you not wear the Band-Aids is not the solution. And obviously, they were pretty horrified otherwise, so, use the Band-Aids. Hopefully OP got a little bit better with getting all those scratches and stuff. Can't boss me around anymore. About 1.5 years ago, I worked at a bar-type place that was pretty small, but got really busy at night, and besides the 2 owners, there was only me and one other worker who was considered the manager. Let's call him Kyle. I was paid $10 an hour and Kyle was paid $15 an hour, which didn't really make much sense because for the most part, I did all the work. I served customers, ran the register, stocked and kept track of what we need, cleaned the entire building at the end of the night, and also cleaned the parking lot of the building since our customers would often litter all over the place. Kyle really just sat in the back and made whatever orders me or the mayors gave him. We were open from noon to 2 a.m. every day. Important. Kyle and I worked from 6 or 7 p.m. to 2 to 3 a.m. Depending on how busy we were. He would work the entire shift if the owners had to do something that day. Now Kyle was an absolute terror to work with. He was always bossing me around and telling me something had to be done when I was already extremely busy. Always saying something wasn't done right, or if I had a little extra free time, he would just try to put some of his workload on me, or if the owners let me have a good break, he would say I'm slacking off. Basically just constantly messing with me and making me mad. I consider myself to have great customer service, so I would never let it get to me while I was at work, and always tried my best to not get mad. Now the owners often go on vacation a few times a year. This time they were going on vacation together for a week and Kyle was scheduled to work every shift from open to close. No problem for him since he's done it before. One of the owners also told us his brother would be coming in to watch over things, but he really didn't know how to run the place or make anything, so one of us were to always be there to make sure everything is good. Kyle and I both had no problems with the plan and we spent that night getting everything prepared for when the owners would be gone. Next day comes around and I get a call at 11:30 a.m. from the owner's brother. He asks where Kyle is and says he isn't answering the phone. I call and get a hold of him and he can't come in for some unknown reason. Okay, whatever, I'll cover your shift. I get ready, go into work, and cover his shift. I was still a little new to making everything, so it took me some time to get the hang of it, but after a few hours, everything went smoothly, especially since our day people were regulars and all knew me. By the end of the night, I had worked 14 hours and was extremely exhausted, so I decided to just sleep in my car and drive home when I woke up. Well, of course, I wake up the next morning and Kyle calls me saying he can't come in again. I give the owner's brother a heads up and go home to get ready for work again. Day 3 rolls around, and of course, Kyle can't come in again. By this point, I was beyond ticked. I have my own life and I have things that I actually want to do besides just work and sleep. I was ticked for a little bit until I realized what I can get out of this if I just work the entire week for him. I call Kyle back and ask why he can't work. He didn't give an answer, of course. And then I tell him that if he has something going on, I can cover the rest of the week for him no problem, so he won't blow his phone up anymore, and he had no problem letting me. I told the owner's brother what the new plan was, and while he was mad at Kyle, he said he would take my side on the whole thing when his brother came home. So, for the rest of the week, I came in every day at 11:30 a.m. and worked until 2 to 3 a.m. The owner's brother would come in and help out wherever he could and would run the register for me when we were extremely busy. The week ended up going great. Me and him never fell behind on work even when it got busy. The owner's brother also realized that having a manager was completely pointless since I did almost all the work in the first place for $5 less. The managers come back and guess who finally shows up for work? Kyle. He comes in acting like he did what he was supposed to and that everything went as planned, and I went along with it during the shift and decided to keep my comments to myself for the end of the night. And once closing time came around, I let everything loose and the owner's brother was right there to back everything up for me. They were both so surprised because he had never done anything like that before. Now I was only doing this because for that week I would have gotten a really hefty paycheck because I ended up working over 90 hours. We were paid under the table. The owners were quite generous and ended up paying me for all the hours at the $15 an hour rate, which I didn't expect but really enjoyed. They then took it a step further because of his brother's comments. Kyle ended up getting his butt handed to him and was fired that night, and he didn't make a single penny for that entire week. Not too long after, they hired a new guy at the same rate as me and also stripped the manager position, so nobody working there had any control over me except for the owners, who now had a new respect for me and just let me do my own thing. I also proved to them that I am able to work a full shift and got as much hours as I wanted. If you're skating by most of the time at work, you can't just dip for a week because then they'll realize you're not doing anything. It'll become too apparent. Good for OP, good on the pay bump, the pay raise, the hours, everything worked out for OP beautifully. My aunt told me to warm up her cheesecake, so I did. So, this happened when my aunt still lived with me. I had just gotten done making a cheesecake for my mom's birthday. It was a raspberry cheesecake, my mom's favorite. After we were all done with dinner, I brought out the cheesecake and we all yelled, "Happy birthday!" I cut the cake and gave everyone a piece. Not even 10 seconds after putting down the plate, my aunt said, "It's too cold, heat it up." I just looked at her and said, "You're not supposed to heat up cheesecake." She just scoffed and said, "Shut up and heat it up." I was already ticked off at her that day because she kept making fun of my tattoos, so I just said, "Fine, I'll heat it up." When I went into the kitchen, she yelled, "Make sure it's hot." I just smiled to myself and said, "Don't worry, I'll make sure it is." I then put the piece of cheesecake in a small bowl and put it in the microwave for 7 minutes. When it was done, I took it out of the microwave and it was a bubbling, boiling hot bowl of cheesecake soup. I grabbed a spoon, I brought it out and put it on the table in front of my aunt. When my aunt saw the bowl, she just stared at it. But when my mom saw it, she started laughing her butt off. My aunt looked at me and quietly said, "What is this?" I just smiled and said, "You said you wanted it hot, so there you go." I just sat down and ate my piece of cheesecake as my aunt stared at her bowl. My aunt never told me to heat up food for her again. Listen, if you want to eat your cheesecake hot, then you can get up, go to the microwave and put it in there for however long you want. See how it turns out. Otherwise, don't bother me about the handcrafted cheesecake that they made, because you're not trying to eat it right. Can't get a tissue? Have a bloody good day. Warning, this story contains blood. This isn't my personal story. It's actually about my friend, but I did receive both the disgust and pleasure of how this went down. So, for some context, my friend, who for the sake of the story will be named David, has some sort of issues with his nose. If he sneezes too much, he will sometimes get a nosebleed. Now, most of his teachers are completely understanding of this. He doesn't overly use tissues and will usually get sent to the nurse to take care of it. One day, we're in 8th period. Now, our 8th period teacher, let's call her Mrs. Thomas, not her real name for personal discretion. She really does not like David. David's been sneezing a lot. This teacher has this thing in her classroom, I forget what it's called, that emits aromas. So, AG emits an aroma that has David sneezing a lot. We're nearing the end of our lecture and David gives me this look. The look of, oh crap. He stands up and dashes to these tissues. As he's about to get one, Mrs. Thomas takes the tissues and tells him to sit back down and not interrupt her lesson. By then, the whole class was sort of watching David. David had a poo-beating grin on his face. He just stared intently at the screen. About 30 seconds pass. The floodgates have opened. Blood starts rolling out of his nose. The girl beside him screams. David calmly looks at the teacher, grin still on his face, and asks for a tissue. By then, blood is dripping onto the desk and the girl beside him is absolutely freaking out. The teacher ushers him to the nurse. The next day, she gave David his own tissue box for her class. The amount of teachers that I read here that are ignorant to students' concerns, students' health issues, it's really kind of frustrating and upsetting because people have things that they need to take care of that teachers get on some kind of dumb power trip and try to deny people for no reason, just because they can, just because they think it's rude that you have some kind of health concern that you need to take care of. It's dumb. Mac and Don's have thrown out all of the regs. It's the end of times. In a How the Turntables post, this actually occurred to me today as I was attempting to score some nugs for the starving halfling at the Golden Arches. I get to the pickup window, Happy Meal, milk, soda for me, and a bag that feels too light for what I ordered. I never checked, but did that time and saw only an order of fries and a straw. I handed it back to the woman working the window saying they forgot my sandwich. Without breaking eye contact, she grabbed a random bag next to her and dumped the contents in my bag. As her coup de grace, she took my straw out of the bag, all while making eye contact and not saying a word, and handed it back. In my shock, I drove off and ended up with 3 orders of fries, a quarter pounder, 10-piece McNugget with extra barbecue sauce, Happy Meal, milk, and soda with no straw. I'm not even mad. The sheer I don't give a freakery that it took to throw the next 6 orders into utter chaos deserves a giant level of respect. Thanks for the extra nuggies, queen. Honestly, I'd be happy as heck if that happened. You order a few things and then you walk away with a whole entire giant meal. It's not the healthy outcome, but it is a pretty satisfying outcome. My brother didn't tell me what drink he wanted. This happened about 12 to 14 years ago, but it's almost like it happened yesterday. My mother organized a barbecue event as a family reunion. I was going around asking people if they wanted tea, coffee, or Milo. I get around to my brother and he said yes to me. Didn't even say what he wanted. I asked 3 times. So I thought, okay, you'll get all 3. I went out to the kitchen and started organizing the drinks. I made my brother's last. Mom came along as I was making it and asked what I was doing. So I told her. She wanted me to just choose one and make it for him. Why should I? I'm not a mind reader. I asked him which one 3 times. I kept on doing what I was doing. The next time, I can't remember how long later, I was doing the same thing, asking who wanted what drinks. I get to my brother and he says yes. I only asked him once. Thought, okay, you didn't learn from last time. This time I made the tea part first and as strong as I could. Then a heaped teaspoon of coffee and a few spoonfuls of Milo. Sugar was added as he has it in one or the other. A year or 2 later, I was staying with him and his wife when he told me exactly what he wanted and how he wanted it. Edit. Milo is a chocolate drink that you can have hot or cold with milk. Australians will even eat it off the spoon. It's one thing to joke and say yes one time, but if you're not going to clarify, some people might not want to make that decision for you, especially if they're asking you 3 times. So don't be surprised when it's your brother and they give you a mixed up 3-in-1 drink. Eventually, it looks like it finally came to him that he needs to choose a preference. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to and watching the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and let us know what you thought about these stories in the comments below. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.